Hi, everybody. Oh, look at these bright lights. I'm excited to be here. Thank you. I want to talk to you today about why changing the way we see changes everything. And do that. Okay. So I'm going to teach you about how to get on your bird, but not yet. We're going to talk first about your story glasses. So a little bit of background as to how I got here, actually. I believe that we all are given certain lenses when we're growing up. And I think we all have these stories that are passed down generationally from our ancestors, and we really don't know that they're active when we're raised by our families. So I like to think that the story that I want to tell is, first of all, it had to do with my parents and how they affected me. My parents were European immigrants. I'm Canadian. You might hear the A and the out when I talk, so apologies. They came from the old country to Canada. My father was Serbian and Mongolian, and my mother was German. And so they both came over on the boat, and they came to Canada with nothing. And they suffered racial prejudice, et cetera. And my mom had the great idea when she met my dad to anglicize our last name and pretend we were somebody else. And my dad began to become very, very successful as an urban planner and a land developer. But he was also a fascinating inventor. So my father was one of these people that saw through the lens of possibility. So I was raised with the idea that you could see something that wasn't there. Now, I actually do see things that aren't there for most people. I make a living doing that, but that's another story which you guys can figure out later. But and that's kind of how I got known, but whatever. So back to my dad. So he saw things like, for example, he was one of the first people to develop rope out of hemp. Actually, a funny story was when he, by accident, planted marijuana plants in Canada instead of hemp, and the RCMP, which is like the feds, came and arrested my dad for planting this stuff, and he didn't know what it was, but that's another whole other story, because he didn't know what he was seeing, but he was trying to make rope. He also developed something called, something to convert anaerobic bacteria to aerobic bacteria in sewage reclamation. He made the first hydrofoil. He was a really interesting guy. And all the while he was inventing things and blowing up our backyard and doing things like my mother would flip out over, he made millions as a land developer. But why he did that was because he was so passionate about the inventions and the things that, the creativity that for him existed everywhere. My mother, on the other hand, was a surprising woman. She was sort of the one who ran the show. My dad was off being Albert Einstein, and my mother was all about social direction. How about that? She was the social director of the household. So when I was maybe 3 years old, my parents jointly decided that I would be a lawyer and my sister would be a professor. And they sent us to a very fancy schmancy private girls' school, and we were the only ones whose real last name ended in itch. But, and brunettes and Slavic, and everybody else was waspy, and I think you guys get the picture. And but they were very clear, my mother was very, very clear about how we would be. And that was because for them, after World War II, safety and security was something that was so, so compelling. And my mother was driven by the fact that she saw the land of opportunity, that, in fact, safety, security was going to come from money, property, and prestige. So fast forward many years later, when the inconvenience of a daughter who could see things and know things about her friends, et cetera, and would blurt things out inappropriately at times that were secrets and things, they realized they had a problem on their hands. But they still sent me to law school anyway, and I still went. Now, just so you know, I'm not a lawyer. But the point is that the lens that I was given to look through was a little skewed. So I had the lens of my mother that said that I had to be a certain way to fit in. And we recognized that that was important. They wouldn't even eat my mom's cake at the bake sale because it wasn't Canadian, it was German, et cetera. So the whole idea that we were European, we're also really they let us know all the time in school. So we were the kids with the salami sandwiches. I used to cry, wanted peanut butter and jelly just to fit in. So, you know, you smell like garlic, what are you gonna do? So I had all these mixed messages, and of course, I was born with my own personality. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to write music and poetry, et cetera. I didn't want to be a lawyer, God forbid, and I couldn't help that I could see dead people, but whatever, that's another story. And they were there, excuse me. So I was unique, to say the least. So the lens, yet again, my mom kept trying to put more lenses on my lenses, like, no, you're only gonna see the world like this. Fast forward to many years later. My dad was 65, retired, and he got very depressed. And so his depression really came to the fact that he felt that he didn't have purpose, because it was also at that time when you had to work and you had to make a living. And my father's whole thing was that he was a leader in his community, et cetera, and he didn't feel he had an identity. And he wanted to invent more things, but my mom was saying, no, 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 why don't we make more money? So here's a lesson here. So my father ended up starting another company with these gazillionaires. And shortly, a few years later, anyway, he lost all the family's money, all the millions, et cetera. And we went from started out poor, got wealthy, and became dirt poor again. So the safety and security that we were taught we were going to have disappeared. And the authenticity that I didn't get a chance to, or my sister didn't get a chance to really foster, wasn't anyone's fault. It was the fact that that's what we were taught we had to see in the world. I don't know if any of you can identify with this, but authenticity, you need to have courage, and you need to be able to really allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to be yourself and to be brave enough to be yourself. And it isn't easy. But so the story glasses had to change. My parents, if you see that, the lens to the left was the scarcity lens. And my mother, for 4 solid years, every single day cried because there was no money. And they had also isolated themselves in their inclusive environment of the wealthy in Toronto, the exclusive. Nobody was included in there. And when they lost everything, all their acquaintances and friends ignored them as if they had a disease. Like, I'm not kidding. It was very, very telling. And what I learned from that was not that it's bad to be rich. Trust me, I like money, okay? It was more that when you become so exclusive and you are not inclusive, and when you trade money and you trade your ambition for your authentic passions and desires, you're going to lose something. Now, both my parents died shortly thereafter. Nobody could take those lenses off for them. They only saw through the lens of scarcity. My dad got Alzheimer's, and my mother died of a brain tumor. So both of them died back to back, very tragically, and they died paupers. At some point, just prior to them dying, I had a very festive lifestyle, I must tell you. For me, my catalyst moment came when I was on my knees, and I was a drug addict. I usually, I'm going to leave out all the shock and awe parts of my story. But, I had really come to a place where I couldn't live in my own skin anymore. And a lens popped out for me. And all of a sudden, I saw possibility. Literally, it came for me where I had to surrender that I was going to die if I kept seeing through the lens of my parents. And they couldn't take theirs off. They couldn't. My mom was young when she died. She was 20 years younger than my dad. And she kept, and then I found out I was a Holocaust, that was the other thing. My mom was a Holocaust survivor and forgot to tell us that we were Jews. We found that out too, the whole time. We didn't know any of this, right? We were like, what? Like, we were going to church every Sunday. Ask me how much therapy that was. So much therapy. That was very interesting. So anyhow, that was also helped me hit my bottom. So what happened after that, and really, I wanted to talk a lot about what I'm passionate about today, because I ended up, of course, deciding at that point that if I'm not authentic, I am going to die. And I decided I was going to wake up with gratitude and see possibility every single day, no matter what, that I had a particular story that could get triggered. And that's what happens to all of us. I've now worked as an intuitive for the past 23 years. I've worked with over 33,000 people individually, and I have clients in 29 countries. I work predominantly today as a business advisor for leaders and influencers, and I train coaches in a process that I've trademarked. It's an energy psychology process that is all based on how we see. And I realize that I've never talked for this short amount of time, so I completely screwed up, and I'm supposed to be on like 5 minutes. Should have been the other way, but now it's 5 minutes, and I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff. But the bottom line is over these past 23 years, and working with these people, all word of mouth, by the way, too. And I used to, in the first 6 years, I told people, I don't really do this. I'm really a singer, so don't come back next year. Because I also had an aspiration as a recording artist. And I followed in my father's footsteps, by the way, in that department. I did get a record deal. I did have all these things happen to me. But I lost my art because I wanted the deal. So I followed my dream, but I didn't really. I followed exactly what my dad did, knowing full well what happened to him. And it was incredible. And that's the other thing. I had an invisible lens because the subconscious is a fascinating tool. 95% of our mind is run by the subconscious. Only 5% is run by the thinking mind that we think is the boss. We think that's our whole mind, and it isn't. I've done tons and tons of research now. I've had people from all over the world, and we are all alike. We all want the exact same things. We want to know that we matter. We know that we want to count. We know that we want to love. And we also know that we have dreams, and that something sometimes prevents us from having those dreams come true. And it's because we are pattern makers, and we follow patterns. There's a reticular activating system of the brain that actually sorts out. It's that automatic pilot that we need to fire. We need to fire the automatic pilot, because we will continue to do certain things until we allow them to come to our consciousness and change them. My coaches are called epiphany midwives, because what I've decided to do is to find a way that I could create a system that could help people shift, not by going to 12 years of therapy like I had to do, because I'm falling asleep in the chair. The minute I started talking to my mother, I'd be like, that did not work. So I needed to find something active that could work for people who really were just realizing that they couldn't move forward because they kept, 5 steps forward, they keep going back to the exact same step again. Why am I here? What is it? So rather than anchoring the story, I came up with this really interesting, unique process that is based on eco-psychology, which means that all of us are part of this extraordinary conscious ecosystem, that we are nature so that our minds understand images of nature. It's based on Jungian psychology, active imagination, and it's all rolled up into this really unique, fun kind of coach-client dialogue based on 3 questions. Where am I? When am I? Who am I listening to? So it's all about perspective. So we learn to see ourselves in a different way. All of us need perspective. Every single person I've ever worked with, every company that I've worked with, every team I've worked with now in the past few years, because the past 3 years I started a school and I'm training coaches all over the world in this process. It's the lack of perspective, because our lives are suction cupped on our faces. Most of us are going, right? We can't see. We think we're seeing. We think we've made plans. We think we know where we're going, but we're not really going very far at all. But the point is that when we are in alignment with our authentic desires, and that's the thing, when we're inspired, and keep an open mind, I really believe that this whole downtown project is an act of practical spirituality. I know nobody likes to say that. We talk about collisions. I really believe in synchronicity, that when you're in alignment with your truest desires and your truest inspiration, and you are willing to take your glasses off, you don't have to hit bottom and pop that other lens out to see possibility. You have to be willing to see things beyond scarcity. Just like Tony Hsieh, who looked at this big, giant, empty, weird place. At first you look at it and go, bleh. And then you see magic here, because he can see. And we can all see. And I saw this weekend, I saw something, not because I'm an intuit, I saw it because you guys showed me the possibility of collaboration, inclusiveness, the idea that we could share, that we could see through a lens of magic, that when we look through the lens and we recognize these collisions we talk about, which I believe is synchronicity, you know when you're in alignment, you know when things are meant to be, and there's nothing woo-woo about that at all. When you look over your life and you do a synchronicity timeline and you think of all those moments in your life that you couldn't possibly plan, that you surrendered to what you know, and intuition tells you what is true for you. And you know that when you're manufacturing something, what doesn't work for you. So synchronicity and magic is something you can see here in the Downtown Project, and it's something that I really believe we need to learn how to recognize. Our culture does not support intuition as a particular skill. My work is all right brain. You're not allowed to bring your left brain into my workshops. It's all intuitive. It's all imagination. It's all allowing yourself to get back at what the indigenous people know, which is that we are part of this extraordinary consciousness, that we are nature, that together we are a collaborative entity, and that is the only way that we're going to survive as a species, is to be creative. Everything that we do, we create our own reality. We also have to learn how to take the lenses off and how to put the glasses of magic on. Anyway, that's what I've got today. Thank you so much for letting me share. Thank you.